Kate Allison. This is Create a Writing Routine That Works for Your Brain. 3 steps to create a writing routine that works for you. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm really grateful for Alice and Leslie for putting this together because this is a really great conference. And I saw in the opening ceremonies, I just felt like, okay, Alice is wearing a bathrobe, we're doing a dance party. This feels like my kind of people. So I'm really, really excited to be here today with you all. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, number one, what a writing routine is, because there are some misconceptions around that can, again, be counterproductive for us. Step 1 is identifying what has and has not worked for you. And then step 2, we're going to talk about when, how, and where you can write. And then step 3, we're going to talk about creating a beginning and ending ritual to signal to your brain when it is time to write and when it is time to stop. And then at the end, I have a few other tips for what to do when you're doing all these things and writer's block hits anyway. So this is my professional bio. I have been editing books since 2018. I've worked with dozens of authors. This needs to be updated because I believe I now have 29 published books with, again, more on the way. And I work with all genres. I work with memoir, nonfiction, general fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and young adult. And I do that because for my brain, I need a variety of projects to work on. So I was thinking about, well, how can I, niche down, because that's the advice that everyone gives. And I realized that working with neurodivergent authors is really what I want to do. So I work with, and I do work with some neurotypical authors, but I really love working with the neurodivergent authors because I feel like y'all are my people. So when I'm editing, I have eagle eyes. I'm able to spot details that need to be changed and look at the big picture. We were having a conversation earlier about, what to do when you're copy editing and you see someone who needs a developmental edit. Well, I always look at it like, I'm going to do them a service and I'm going to tell them that, you need developmental editing, and then let them know what that would look like. So I typically when I'm working with authors, I start by doing a manuscript review, and that allows me to see what type of editing they need. And then I work collaboratively with the author to make the book the best it can be while maintaining their voice and message and really making it fit within their vision. I'm very passionate about making sure that the author's message comes through and that the author feels seen and heard throughout the writing and editing process. And some fun facts about me, because again, this is my professional bio. I do have a dog. Her name is Trixie. She's right here next to me. She is sleeping right now while I'm giving this presentation. I put pictures of her in the Discord Pet Palace channel, so if you want to check that out, she's very cute. She's a pit bull husky mix, so she's a pit ski. And she's a very goofy dog, very fun to be around. I also, you can see behind me, I have my Lego collection here. I love putting Legos together. I have the typewriter, which is a really cool set for anyone who is in the writing or editing business. It was just so much fun to put together and then be like, oh, yay, I have this now. So you can see that over there. Yeah. So that's a little bit about me and what I do and why I do it. So now let's dig into, first of all, what exactly is a writing routine? Now, when we hear the word routine, we think of something that we do like at the same time every day, every week, and I want to emphasize that for neurodivergent authors, that doesn't necessarily work. So a writing routine for us, number one, it's unique to you. It's not something that you're going to be able to say, okay, everyone should write the way I write, because your brain is unique. It's also flexible. Again, what works one day, you might wake up one morning full of energy, drink your coffee, and find, okay, I need to sit down and write because I need to get this out of my head. The next day, you might wake up and you're like, yeah, I don't feel inspired today. Or something feels off and I just don't feel like I have the spoons to write. If you're not familiar with the spoon theory, it's the idea that those of us that have chronic illness, which often occurs along with neurodivergence, we only have a limited number of spoons, whereas people who are neurotypical and healthy, they have an unlimited number of spoons to do all the things that we need to do to be human, including like taking care of themselves, eating healthy, exercising, spending time with family and friends. Whereas those of us who are neurodivergent and or have chronic illness, we have a much more limited amount of spoons. So we have to be careful how we spend them. And on a given day, you might only have enough spoons to, you might say, okay, I could either eat lunch today or I can write. What is more important for your well-being? And in some cases, it might actually be writing, but it's important to check in with yourself and recognize when that's happening and allow yourself the space to do what is right for you. So step one, it's really important that we understand our own brains. And, I'll be honest, I'm a nerd. I love learning things. So I love learning all about how our brains work and how it all comes together. So step one is identifying what has and has not worked for you. So, like I said, everyone here is unique. You are all here because you have something to give to the world. And that's true whether you're a writer or an editor. I know there are a lot of editors in this room too, and I hope that this is helpful for you because you can apply this to your editing routine as well. So it's not just for writing, but it is geared towards writers. So you're here because you have something special. You have a gift. And one of the things I've learned about editors and writers is that we each have our own approach to things. And that might mean, I'm a great editor, but I might have a client I might meet someone who isn't a great fit for me because they need something that someone else offers. On the other hand, you might meet someone and say, you know what? Yeah, this person isn't right for me, but I can send her over to somebody else that I know. And so understanding what it is that are your superpowers and how you can help people allows you to really figure out how to best use your gifts, your writing gifts, your editing gifts, whatever it is that you're using, because like I said, we all have different capabilities and we all have different superpowers. So here's some writing advice you may have heard, and I don't know if there's a way to raise your hand in here if you want to comment in the chat. Let me know which of these you've heard and which of these you've tried. So one thing that I've heard is, oh, I can't find the time to write. Well, you should just get up an hour earlier and write. I don't know about you, but sleep is crucial for me. If I don't get enough sleep, I can barely function, let alone write. So getting up an hour earlier, that only works if you can put the sleep somewhere else, which if you're struggling to find time to write, you're not going to be able to find another hour to put sleep somewhere else. I've also heard, write every day, no matter what. And again, we don't always have the spoons to write. And trying to force ourselves to do something, it's going to cause pushback. It's not going to cause us to feel good. And it just doesn't. And again, some of these, you may find that if any of these work for you, that's great, do them. But they might not, and that's okay. So the other thing that I've heard is, just write even if what you write is shitty. And while that isn't awful advice because it is good to get into the habit of writing, and the more we practice writing, the better we get at it. The truth is, as neurodivergent people, when we do something poorly, we don't feel inspired to continue it. So I don't know about you, but when I write something and I don't like it, I'm not motivated to continue writing. So instead, what I find works best for me is to, okay, if I need to marinate on something, then, maybe I'll go for a walk or do something that will help bring some inspiration to me. And that way that I can write better. Yeah, and oh, yes, don't rely on inspiration. That's so true. Thank you, Ash, for bringing that up. We do need some inspiration. And it is true that you may not always feel the inspiration, but sometimes the hardest part is getting started. And then once you get started, the ideas start flowing. So you can, if you're not feeling inspired, you can always sit down and, you know, start writing, write for about 5 minutes. And then if that doesn't work, you say, okay, you know what, I'm done. And if you do feel inspired to continue to write, then you continue to write. The other thing that you may have heard is, okay, every time you sit down to write, set word count goals. Well, one other thing that those of us with neurodivergence often struggle with is pathological demand avoidance, which means that the second that we say, okay, here's my goal, here's what I'm going to do, we push back. So if I say, okay, I'm going to sit down and write 1,000 words, then suddenly I'm going to look around and I'm going to realize, you know what? I haven't vacuumed in a week. I need to vacuum. Now, that works if my goal is to get my house clean, but it doesn't work if my goal is to actually start writing. Yes, the stereotypical advice sounds to me like just try harder. Thank you, Kelly. That's a really good point. And again, that doesn't work for us. We need to work smarter, not harder. So I want you to take some time to think about, you know, which of these have you tried? And yes, Elizabeth, all of us with pets need to vacuum. Oh my gosh, yes, that is very true. So think about what you have tried and what you haven't tried and what's worked for you. So maybe you've tried scheduling time to write every day or every week, but again, life gets in the way. And even if life doesn't get in the way, you might not have the spoons to write on a day that you scheduled writing. Have you tried writing even if you don't like what you write? And how has that worked out for you? And, you know, sometimes people say, okay, use stream of consciousness to keep writing. And that can work really well for like a short, like 5-minute burst. But if after that, if it's not working, then it's time to stop and put it away. If you've tried setting goals, so there are different goals that you can set. We talked about word count goals. There's also time spent. There's also, okay, I want to get through a scene. And then there's also co-writing, which that actually often does work really well for us. But again, everyone's different. You know, you can do this in person. You know, there are a lot of, you can try looking on Meetup, or you can create your own co-writing group at a library. And then there's also virtual co-writing groups as well, which can also be very helpful, but can also be distracting, especially if you're working with neurotypicals and they're all on Zoom and you have that big Zoom wall of faces that just doesn't help. Yes, and when I teach writing, I tell my students to write a paper that is guaranteed to get an F. That's to teach them about editing. That's smart. Then let's see, it's so variable for me what works on a given day. Sometimes co-writing is great for me. Other times it's so distracting and I never know until I try, which is frustrating. Yes, that is true. And that's why, again, what works on one day might not work for another day. Yes, stream of consciousness or free writing after a walk, shower, dream, just getting some little detailed scenes, bits of dialogue down, and then letting them marinate work well. Yes, yes. Good point, Kelly. And yes, I cannot do the write badly because then I get disgusted. Okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about finding out what has and has not worked for you in the past, let's talk about some ways that you can experiment. So there are 3 basic ways, you know, and this is just a taste of some things that you can do. You can experiment with when you write, how you write, and where you write. And varying your routine can help with motivation. Yes, you can see I have my dog person mug here. It's great for a big cup of tea when I'm presenting. There we go. So you can experiment with when to write, you know, maybe first thing in the morning, maybe you schedule it every day, maybe you try in the evening, maybe you try on your lunch break, you know, whenever you want to try for you. How you write, you know, obviously most of us write using the computer these days, but you can also try handwriting if that is something that, because, okay, I said earlier, I'm a brain geek, and what I find really interesting is that our brains actually work differently when we're writing by hand than when we're typing. A different part of our brain lights up. So what that means is that if you're stuck, you can always try handwriting and see if that gets you somewhere. And there are tools that allow you to that mimic handwriting, that allow you to upload so you don't have to type it out. So that's up to you how you want to do that. And then where you write at home, maybe you have a special writing spot, or maybe you don't. Maybe you like to write in a coffee shop or at a library. Ooh, I just figured out that writing while cozy helps me write more than at my desk. Yes, that is so true. So think about when you feel most motivated. Do you feel most motivated in the early morning, in the late morning, lunchtime, afternoon, evening, or nighttime? And again, you can check in with yourself, when you wake up and say, okay, how do I feel right now? And then schedule check-ins with yourself throughout the day to acknowledge, okay, when do I feel motivated? And this can be motivation to write or to do something else. It's good to acknowledge, our rhythms. And then we can also experiment with how often. We talked about the write every day, no matter what advice. And again, if that works for you, that's great, do it. But if it doesn't work for you, that's okay. And, so other people, they may schedule time to write once or twice a week. Other people might not write anything for long stretches of time, but then take a week or a weekend and go on a vacation, like go lock themselves in a hotel room and just write. So whatever works for you, it is great. And it's also important to acknowledge, what outside circumstances affect your writing schedule. So that might be, maybe you feel most motivated, like, when you wake up, but you have kids, you got to get the kids to school, so you just can't write during that time. And in that case, what you can do is you can try looking at, okay, can I write on the weekends, or can your partner get the kids ready for school 1 or 2 days a week? And again, this all depends on your own circumstances, and it's going to be different for everyone. So the other thing to play with when to write is how long you're writing for. So, some people work best, if they write in, 15-minute, 30-minute bursts. Other people you may want to schedule a whole day where you're just writing, because you know that you can get into the flow. And once you get into the flow, then you just, you lose all sense of time. Do make sure that you're taking care of yourself, eating, drinking. That's important. And then, when you need to take a break, take a break. Yes. Oh, I sometimes write in Google Docs on my phone while in the carpool line. Yes, that is a very good point. Is sometimes those moments where you're sitting waiting for something, you're in the doctor's office, you're, wherever you are, those can be really good moments to just write, even if you're just jotting down notes. So now we talked about when, let's talk about how. So, I see a lot of comments here about handwriting, so you can use a computer. If you want to, you can use a typewriter, but I'm not sure if that would be productive for most people. Maybe if that's something that you grew up writing with, it might be easier for you. You can do handwriting with pen, pencil, and paper. And another tool that a lot of authors don't think about is voice-to-text transcription. So this is, let's say you just need to talk through some ideas. This is where voice-to-text transcription can be really helpful, because if you're staring at a blank page and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to write, if you just start talking, then suddenly it flows. And it's always easier to edit what you've already written than to start writing on a blank page. So I love using voice-to-text. It is a technology that is in its infancy, so you do need to edit it to make sure that it's saying the right words. It's interesting when you get messages that say things that you're like, I think that's what that person meant to say. Oh my gosh, it's 11:34 already. Wow. I was worried that I wasn't going to fill all the time, and now I'm like, okay, we have 11 minutes. So another thing about how to write is setting goals. So some authors set word count goals, and again, that can be, if that works for you, that's great. If that doesn't work for you, that's okay. And the other problem with word count goals is some people write more concisely than others, and other people write more flowery. So if you write more concisely, it can be very challenging to actually meet that goal. So we can think about other goals that we can set, which can include, maybe you want to say, okay, I'm going to sit down at my computer or get out my notebook and I'm going to write for 30 minutes. Or maybe you want to complete a scene or chapter. Or maybe you want to complete a description of a character or setting, or describe a character's backstory or the history of your world, or a certain way, especially if you're writing science fiction or fantasy, a certain way in which, you know, how your world differs from ours, and how, for example, how the seasons work, how the calendar works, those types of things. One other key to setting goals is that the instant that I say, okay, my goal is to write this scene, again, there's that pathological demand avoidance that comes up. So I love using the phrase, I would love to finish writing this scene, because that way that little shift of words creates such a shift in mindset. Instead of feeling like, okay, now I have to get this done, it feels like, okay, I get to do this, and this is exciting, and I get to be proud of myself when I accomplish it. And if I don't get there, that's okay, because I said I would love to. And you know what? Even if I didn't meet that goal, I still made progress. So then the next thing is to experiment with where to write. You know, some people get inspiration when they're outdoors. You know, some people like to be cozy in bed and write indoors. You know, some people like to write at home. Other people like to write in a public space. Maybe you need that ambient sound of the coffee shop, or maybe you need the quiet of a library. And then there's also, you know, are you going to write alone or with others? So this is where the co-writing aspect comes in. And again, you can do this, you know, you can even just do it with a friend. Just say, hey, I'd like to meet up at a coffee shop and, you know, work together to write, if you have writing friends in your area. And if you don't, I'm sure that there are Facebook groups where you can find writing friends in your area. So this is another way that you can experiment. So the next thing that I want to talk about is creating a starting and stopping ritual. And this is using your senses to turn your brain onto writing mode, to tell your brain, okay, right now it's time to write. And I'm curious if anyone here has something that they do when they start writing to help them get into the writing mood. Music playlist. Oh, writing gloves. Oh, that's a good one. I didn't think about that one. So a ritual is something that you only do when you start and stop writing, because that way it tells your brain when it's time to start working on your book and when it's time to stop. Binaural beats. Oh, I was 16,000 words into my novel and was finally getting it to a place I was happy with and proud of. Then my hard drive failed and I lost everything. Oh, that is so discouraging. Ooh, I have candles for each character. Oh, I really like that. I light a candle for the character that it's time to write for. I have a theme song. Yes. Okay. So this is all things that I'm going to get into here. Y'all are so great here. And yes, I live in central Pennsylvania. I've never lived in the South, but I use the word y'all because I find it to be a very useful word. And that also gets to the importance of backing your work up, which I know we all think, oh, it's not going to happen to me until it does. So using your senses to start writing. So this is where you can use a sense of smell. Maybe you have, you light a specific candle or incense, and this can be, I really like what Samantha said about having a candle for each character. You know, now you don't have to do that. You can have one candle for your writing time. And then taste. You know, if you want to use the sense of taste, and the reason why I'm using the senses here is because it really helps establish that mind-body connection. So you can drink a favorite beverage. Maybe you have a certain type of tea or coffee that you like, or you eat like a small piece of chocolate or something that you only indulge in when you're going to start writing. And then sound, you can listen to specific music. Yes, and there's also the sense of touch. So fancy writing gloves from storyarts.com, that's a great thing too. Or maybe you have like a special blanket that you wear when you write. So anything that works to use your senses to tell your brain, okay, it's time to start writing. And yes, there are also cheaper options for writing gloves. I mean, I have a pair that just keep my hands warm, but are fingerless, and they weren't very expensive at all. But you can also get nice ones as a treat for yourself. Another potential starting ritual could be moving your body. And I want to clarify that you should choose one of these, not all of these, because then by the time you get done with all of this, then you'll be, then your writing time will be over. So this can be, you know, a 5-minute movement that feels good for you. This can be a short yoga sequence. It could be going for a walk outside. It could be doing specific exercises. And again, this uses the mind-body connection to tell your brain when to start. And it also helps, the more you're in flow, the more the ideas are going to come more easily. So now let's talk about ending your session with, which, yes, Jason had a very good point about losing all of his work. So when you end your session, I didn't put this here, but yes, do make sure that you back up your work. And then make a note of what you accomplished. You know, be proud of yourself. And leave a note on where you want to go next so that when you start next time, you know what you're going to do. And again, you can play with this and find another way to end your session that works for you. The important thing is acknowledging what you've accomplished, making sure to back up your work, and then knowing where you want to go next. Ryan says, my biggest struggle is distractions. I tend to get distracted by video games or other procrastinations. So for that, what I would recommend is, Ryan, if possible, write in a different room that doesn't have your distractions. So that's one option. That's where handwriting can also come in, because if you're not on your computer, then you can't start playing video games. Or if you are, you know, if you find that you're constantly like checking your phone to see if you have text messages, you know, put your phone on Do Not Disturb, or even if you can, turn it off. Now, if you need to have it on for emergencies, obviously leave it on. This depends on your circumstances. But if you can turn your phone off, turn your phone off. You know, whatever it is that is distracting you, find a way to put it aside. And then what you could do is you could add this to your ending ritual. Say, okay, when I'm done writing, then I'm going to play this video game. So that is, yeah. So Ryan, if you really can't write in a separate area, that's where I would recommend using handwriting or another technique to kind of distract yourself. Or if you need to use the internet for your video games, you can turn off your Wi-Fi, and that way you have to write. Now, of course, you want to turn it back on before you're done so you can back up your work. So yeah, so there are lots of, and I love all the ideas that y'all are coming up with. Sometimes I use different mouses for work and play, or have a special keyboard for gaming. Yes, those are all such great ideas. So now let's talk about, oh my gosh, we have 2 minutes left. This time is just flying by. So ideas to help when you get stuck. So we all get writer's block. And it's important when you get writer's block. Number one, be kind to yourself. It happens to everyone. And, you know, it's part of the process of writing, you know, and, you know, take some time to check in with yourself, say, okay, what do I need right now? Maybe you have a headache and you need to stretch and take some pain medication. Maybe you feel like your head is in the clouds and you need to spend some time grounding yourself. So take a break and do what you need to do. That might include drinking some water, getting some fresh air, you know, whatever it is that will help you kind of reset. That could even mean like a 20-minute nap, whatever it is that you need to do. And again, it's okay if writer's block hits you one day and you don't get back to writing that day. But if you're on a deadline and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I really want to get this done, then another option is to start with what you know. So you can take a scene that you've already written and try writing it from another character's point of view, preferably one of your more minor characters who you don't feature a lot, because this will give you a whole different perspective on the scene, but you're also writing what you know. You have a framework for what you're writing. And take a note on what changes in the scene and what stays the same. So this can also be a good time to work on things like your character descriptions, your character backstory, scene settings, other enhancements. Like take 2 characters who don't interact in your book and think about, okay, well, what would an interaction between them look like? Something like that. And other ways to explore it, I know we're at time, so I'm going to get through this quickly. If you need to go, I totally understand, do what you need to do, but if you can hang out for a few minutes, I'll be done in just a few minutes here. So have fun, think of how can I play with this? What can I do to make this fun? And write stream of consciousness style, write using a speech to text app. We talked about that. Another thing you can do is find ways to play with your characters. So let's say you're writing a historical fiction novel that takes place in 1890. Put your characters in today's world. Imagine them having a conversation at a coffee shop. What would that look? Okay, Amanda asks, is there a difference between a writing routine for your first drafts and a writing routine for editing? Editing in this case as a writer, not as a professional editor. I would say that that's going to depend on you. I do find that the editing process, for me, because I'm a professional editor, the editing process is much easier than the writing process. So it just depends on what works for you. So I do want to talk about real quick how you can work with me. So I do have a free guide here on how to bust writer's block, and I'll put these links in the comments here. And one thing that I'm really excited about is in March, I'm going to be running a challenge on how to create a writing routine that works for your brain. So basically digs into all of this, but it goes a lot deeper. It comes with worksheets. And if you want to get information about that, if you sign up for the freebie, you'll get emails about the challenge when I post that. The other thing that I do, so I do book writing coaching. I also do manuscript reviews and book editing. If you are interested in working with me, you can schedule a free call. And again, I'll put it here. And that's all that I have. If you have questions, feel free to put them on the chat. Again, I'll hang on for another few minutes. If you need to go eat lunch, or I'm on Eastern time, I'm not sure where y'all are, do whatever you need to do. But if you do have questions, I can hang on for a few minutes and answer them, because I want to make sure that you get what you need here. Okay, Jason says, against my professional editor wife's advice, I tend to edit myself as a work. Okay, when I start a new day, I tend to go back to and reread the last chapter to remind myself where I was. More often than not, I say, ew, and rework things. Yes. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. So that really depends. Do you find that that works for you? I mean, if that works for you, do it. And again, the traditional writing advice is no, you should write everything first and then edit. But if you find that, going back and reworking something works for you, then that's great. Now, where you can get stuck is if you rework it and then the next day you come back to it and you're like, okay, I don't like the way I reworked it. I need to rework it again. And you prevent that from moving yourself forward. I'm usually more happy with my changes. In that case, that feels like that's motivating for you. So I would recommend doing that. And by the way, Jason, thank you so much for putting all of this together. This is an amazing platform, and I'm just impressed with everything that you did. So thank you so much for that. Joe, I tend to read my older works as though I am just having a nice read at night and edit, make notes as I go. Ooh, I like that plan. And again, if that works for you, then that's great. Kelly, I like that editing as I go style too, but I have to stop myself from cycling and move forward. Yes, and that is where the challenge comes in, is how do we make sure that we actually have time to move forward if we're constantly reworking what we're working. And that might be where you might want to just make notes on, okay, here's what I'd like to change about this scene when I come back to it, but for right now, I'm going to move forward. All right, so that is all that I have. Thank you so much, everyone. I was so excited when I saw this conference, and it's really great to be here. I feel like y'all are my people, so feel free to chat with me. I'm probably going to go eat lunch now, but then afterwards I'll be hanging out in the space, and I look forward to talking to you all. And Zadie, I break up my manuscript by settings and characters. Yes, that's great. So it's great to organize your thoughts, have a way to organize your thoughts so that you know where you are going. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. And I want to remind you all that your story matters.